The U.S.-Israel war against Iran is in full swing. Missile exchanges are unfolding across the region. Energy infrastructure is burning across multiple fronts. There are attacks on U.S. bases. Markets are reacting violently. And multiple countries are suddenly deploying military assets across the Eastern Mediterranean here, right off the coast of Cyprus. So joining me to break it all down is John Kiriakou, former CIA officer, and one of the most outspoken critics of how wars are sold to the American public. Let's get straight into it. John, welcome.
Thank you, Susie. It's good to see you again.
Always a pleasure to see you too, John. I hope you're doing well.
Thank you.
John.
Thank you. Thank you. And the same to you.
The best. I'm trying to do the best that we can here. You know, you've been receiving texts and messages from me, so.
You're under direct threat in a time of war. Listen, if you end up with PTSD, it would be completely and perfectly normal. It's not every day that when we go to bed at night, we have to worry about being blown up because we happen to be in a war zone through no fault of our own.
Yeah. Well, Britain happens to have bases in Cyprus. There's nothing we can do about it. It's a part of the creation of the Republic of Cyprus. It's so there's nothing we can do about it. Anyway, we have no say in it, and we just hope and pray that the incidents that occurred will not follow. Of course, there were attacks on the British bases and not on Cypriot soil, but the British bases are based on Cyprus land. So they're mutually exclusive. Mm-hmm. And when we say British bases,
that's right.
I mean, I'm sorry, I'm supposed to be interviewing you, but just to get the context out there, they're not just some military bases with barracks and sleeping arrangements for the staff. They occupy 3% of Cyprus land. So within the perimeter of the British bases, you got tens, if not hundreds, of Cypriot villages and towns, and thousands of Cypriot population living within what is called British sovereign British areas of Cyprus.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, outrageous.
And schools
in the 21st century,
public
no less.
Schools there. All of last week, the citizens of Akrotiri village, from which the British base has been named after, they evacuated the whole village. The schools were closed, and some went to live with family. Others went to live in monasteries. They couldn't find refuge anywhere else. So, let's get into it now for our American viewers also. John, I wanted to ask you that there are many Americans who've lived through Iraq and Afghanistan, and they're asking a simple question. How and why Washington has fundamentally miscalculated this new war in the Middle East?
That's really the big question. And forgive me, I'm going to give you a very long-winded answer, but I think it needs some explanation. When George W. Bush decided to create a reason to wage war against Iraq, he knew that he needed to win over public opinion first. And he crisscrossed the country, just repeating the lie over and over again that Saddam Hussein had weapons of mass destruction and that they would be used against the United States. And Bush was successful in winning over the hearts and minds of the American people. Donald Trump has done literally nothing to explain to Americans why this war was necessary. The truth of the matter is the United States partnered with Israel to attack Iran, another country that poses no threat to the United States, just because the Israelis insisted that we do it. I've said before on many podcasts, and I'm going to say it again, in all the years that I was in government, whether it was at the CIA or at the Senate Foreign Relations Committee, and even before I entered government, going back to the 1980s, every single Israeli prime minister that ever came to Washington asked every single American president to bomb Iran. Please bomb Iran, bomb Iran, bomb Iran. And every single president said no. And presidents have talked about this publicly. Obama, yes. George W. Bush, Joe Biden, in the form, as recently yesterday, of Tony Blinken, having said the same thing, that the Israelis would demand every single time they'd come here to bomb Iran. And they were always told no until Donald Trump said yes. Now, there are rumors that the reason he said yes was that Benjamin Netanyahu said that if Israel were forced to act alone, they would use nuclear weapons.
Haven't they pulled that card? That haven't they used that before also in the past?
In the past, yes, they have pulled that in the past. But why not call the bluff and say, you know what, you want to nuke Iran? Go for it. This is not our fight. It's not our war. You go ahead and attack Iran with nuclear weapons, and then you answer to the international community. Go ahead and do it. And for what purpose? There was a fatwa more than 20 years ago issued by the late Ayatollah Ali Khamenei, forbidding the Iranian government from creating a nuclear bomb, a fatwa, which we don't talk about in the United States. And there have been two, not one, two national intelligence estimates, which are the final analysis of every single organization in the American intelligence community, determining that Iran was not building a nuclear weapon. It was not. But we bombed them anyway because the Israelis told us to. The Israelis have a hold on American politics that is unprecedented, and it's unlike anything else that we've seen anywhere in the world. They have lobbyists, effective lobbyists, working at every single level of government. And if you don't toe the Israeli line, they will run a candidate against you in the primary, and 80% of the time, they've won. They will spend millions of dollars to defeat you, no matter what office you're running for. And politicians don't have the guts to stand up to them. And so now here we are in a war that has almost immediately dragged the entire region into it, and it has caused our Arab allies to say, wait a minute. Kuwait is hosting 50,000 American ground troops. Saudi Arabia, 15,000 American ground troops. Bahrain is the headquarters of the American Fifth Fleet. Qatar hosts the largest American Air Force base in the world. And the United Arab Emirates has at least 10,000 American ground troops at 3 different bases. And those countries were still attacked. And they still have casualties. So what benefit do they have of hosting American forces and American troops and American fighter jets in their countries? All they have received is death and destruction. One final point, Susie. For the United States and Israel to win, right? To win, in air quotes, we need to see the utter collapse and replacement of the Iranian government, and to see that replacement be a pro-American, pro-Israeli Zionist regime. That will never happen in a million years. On the other hand, all the Iranians need to do to win is to survive. That's it. So in my view, this is a no-win situation for the United States and for Israel, and instead it is bringing only death and destruction to the rest of the region.
God, there's so many aspects to it. One can talk for hours.
Yeah.
You mentioned about, even in the elections, how, when was it? In 2024, your last elections, it's AIPAC themselves, they put out this post celebrating that 95, it wasn't 90, or it was 90 or 95%, it wasn't less, of the people elected in the House, so Congress and Senate, were, pro-AIPAC, pro-Israel people. So yeah. It's clear who they're serving. They're not serving the American people. Mm-hmm. They're not serving the American interests. And that's very sad. And a recent example is Lindsey Graham. What was the deal with him? all of these last few days, appearing on all these channels, making all these statements as if he's the president of the country, and wearing that Cuba hat on, mentioning that Cuba is next. I mean, the world's gone crazy. And he was also calling for deeper U.S. military action against Iran, and calling his South Carolina constituents to go fight for whom? For whom? I need your comments on this, because Americans, I'm happy to see that, or is it me getting the wrong impression, wrong idea all the way from here? You tell me if I'm wrong, but I think Americans are waking up. The general public is waking up, because there's also polls taking place and that have come out saying that this war has got the lowest support from the American public from all the wars that America has ever been involved in. So just your comments on these, because we need your feedback here.
So there are two polls that have come out in the last 3 days that show 27% in the one poll and 4% in the other poll of Americans support the war. So the vast majority of Americans are this war. So when you come right to it, in 2016, this is one of the important reasons that Donald Trump got elected president, because we were involved in these forever wars. We had transitioned into a full-time wartime economy, and the Democrats were just as pro-war as the Republicans. And so the Republican Party split to the traditional neoconservative side, embodied by John McCain, who is dead, and Lindsey Graham, who I call Her Majesty Lindsey Graham. On the other side, the Democrats were pro-war. And so there was a large anti-war faction in the American electorate, and they voted for Trump because Donald Trump promised no new wars. And so we got through the first term without any new wars, although he did kill 2 senior Iranian intelligence and military officials in Iraq. He did wage war in Syria, but these were seen more as counterterrorism operations. Somehow, Donald Trump forgot who he was, and he forgot what his constituents were demanding. And so Donald Trump, every Republican, every Democrat before him, decided that war was pretty good, and we could use a little bit of an economic boost. And so he was going to wage war alongside the Israelis. Again, Trump person is such that he needs glorification, constant glorification. One thing about Donald Trump's personality is that he craves glorification. For example, in the middle of the night, he added his name to the John F. Kennedy Center for the Performing Arts, one of the most beautiful buildings in the entire country. So now it says the Donald J. Trump and John F. Kennedy Center for the Performing Arts. He is holding up highway funds unless we change the name of our airport from Dulles International Airport to the Donald J. Trump International Airport. He won't allow New York City to complete its subway tunnel unless they change the name George Washington Bridge to the Donald J. Trump Bridge.
We know this about his personality, but what I'm wondering is.
But my point, though, related to the personality, though, is that real glory to him can only come with war. He can only go down in history books as the president who overthrew the Iranian government, when every other president since Jimmy Carter failed. That he was the that overthrew the Iranian government, and he brought peace and prosperity in the Middle East, and now it's the land of milk and honey, and everybody's going to live happily ever after. The reason why we're already bogged down is because he really believed that as soon as we fired the first shot, the whole Iranian government would collapse like a house of cards, because these wealthy Iranian Americans, mostly in Southern California, most of whom happened to be Jewish, convinced him that the whole thing was a house of cards, and that it was so unstable, the first rocket would make the whole thing fall apart, and it didn't. It didn't. And they're not afraid of our missiles. And they have 92 million people, and the country is the size of all of Western Europe. And so what are you going to keep launching pinprick missile attacks? Because they can take those for the next 100 years.
Yeah.
Or are you going to put boots on the ground and then tell Americans to expect 10,000 dead soldiers in the next 6 months? So now we're stuck.
There's also the video circulating, recent footage by The Sun in the UK showing the Iranian missiles emerging from underground silos that are completely like, you can't tell. It's the desert. There's no even like, there's nothing to tell that below that there's anything, you know, and the announcement they made yesterday from Iran that future launches will carry warheads exceeding 1 ton. Future attacks, each missile will be carrying warheads exceeding 1 ton. I mean, for 20 years, the U.S. failed to defeat the Taliban in Afghanistan, when all they were hiding in the mountains and in the caves were AK-47s and RPG launches and, you know, hidden weapon caches. So how are they gonna defeat this? We're not talking about RPGs and AK-47s. How realistic? I mean, of course you can bomb an underground facility just like they did with Nasrallah, but you need to know where it is, and they don't know where these ones are.
No, they don't know. They don't know. That's why they had to use a 30-ton bomb last year when bombing Iran, because they had an idea where it was. They weren't sure if there was anything in it, and then Trump, being Trump, said last year that the entire Iranian nuclear program had been obliterated. That was his word, obliterated. So either he lied, he was tricked, or he's too stupid to know that he wasn't able to obliterate it.
Yeah, because
and now we're in a war.
If it's been obliterated, then why are you stating now that you're going to you've gone to this war because there were days away from producing a nuclear weapon, which is something we've been hearing for 30 days from Bibi's mouth. Anyway.
You know, there's a video.
You either obliterated it or
around.
you didn't.
Exactly. There's a video going around of every time Netanyahu said on the floor of the United States Congress
we've seen it.
that Iran is 6 months away from a nuclear bomb. It starts from the
90s and it reaches, Yeah. I think Americans are now coming to realization of this, though. We're aware of these lies.
Yes. You know, there's kind of a mystery going on right now, too, Susie, as to where exactly Netanyahu is.
Yes.
There were reports that he was in Germany. He was hiding in Germany. I heard today he's hiding in Cyprus. Wherever he happens to be, he's hiding. You know, what kind of wartime leader is that? Yeah.
Well, I mean, they seem to be on his tracks a whole lot now. I mean, they seem to know. I mean, it's kind of like they're using his playbook now. You know, I don't know how they've managed. Maybe it's the Russians feeding them like the satellite reconnaissance and targeting intelligence. Right. I don't know if it's from the Russians or they've managed to infiltrate with their agents, just like they did. You know, the Israelis did, but they did hit his house. They did target his house, and his brother was in his house, and his brother is dead. They are employing Israel's tactics of, you know, taking out the heads, the leadership, because they've also targeted Ben Gvir's house. And Ben Gvir, I don't know what is the latest, but up until last night, the report was that he was seriously injured, critically injured. So they're now employing Israel's tactics.
They are. It's the same tactic. Yes, and this has to have the Israelis on their heel. You know, I don't think that they expected any of this.
No,
I think that it was the Israelis who convinced Trump that Iran was a house of cards. That the Israelis did that because they actually believe themselves.
Well, they wanted to use they only have a limited time left up until the midterm elections, and all the analysts are saying, even you, that this is their last big opportunity to take out Iran because they're getting the feedback that the American public has had it this time. So time was running, and they also have their fall. I think there's also fall elections in Israel, but
yes.
Trump, for that matter, Trump came out yesterday. I mean, you see him with the press. He's making all this like crazy ass statements. They were asking him about the tomahawks, and he's like, I don't know, maybe I sold them tomahawks, I don't know. And then he was throwing Steve Witkoff, what's the name of his son-in-law? God, Kushner.
Jared Kushner.
Yes, and Hegseth under the bus saying, they gave me the info, and that's why I decided to, call the war, and it was based on info that, and he named them and he threw them under the bus. So, I mean, where does Jared Kushner come into this anyway? He doesn't hold an official position within the government. So you're saying out publicly that, God, you're going by Jared Kushner's suggestions that Iran is going to attack us soon. That's why you're telling the American public? That's why you entered this war?
And let me add something too. The Russians made a statement today that made perfect sense. The Russians said that they will no longer engage in settlement talks with the Ukrainians that are headed by the United States, because the United States can't be trusted. It was engaged supposedly in talks with Iran, pretending to go through talks with Iran, and then they attacked Iran. So the Russians said, why should we trust the Americans to broker talks with Ukraine when they could just as soon turn around and attack us in the middle of the talks? And I think that's exactly right.
Yeah, I mean, the two wars with Iran happened in the middle of the so-called discussions that America was having with Iran on its nuclear program. So, I mean, they can't be trusted anymore. And Trump did reach out behind the scenes twice in these 10 days for a ceasefire with the Iranians, and
that's what we've been told. Yeah.
Said no. Well, Bibi didn't like it, and he was calling over at the White House to see if these reports were true. Right? I mean, what does this show? Who's running the show? Who's the president of America? Or is the president of America president of America, or is he representing, whose interests is he representing?
Honestly, on foreign policy, Benjamin Netanyahu has just as much authority as whoever happens to be president of the United States. We've conceded foreign policy to the Israelis and to Israeli interests.
But John, it seems that the Americans are inclined into asking for, getting into back channel talks for a ceasefire, and seeing it's not working. It seems that Trump has called Putin and asked for Putin's help on this. Is this true?
I wouldn't be surprised. I haven't heard that, but okay. I wouldn't be surprised.
So this was the reporting coming in from Thanasis Avgerinos. He's a very well-respected, very well-connected Greek reporter based in Moscow. And this was his reporting late last night on big Greek channels. That the report he has from the Kremlin is that Donald Trump reached out to Putin for him to intervene to hopefully broker a ceasefire with Iran, because Iran isn't having it. His two attempts so far, they turned them down. So this is a report that's come out.
Yeah, I believe that. And I'll tell you what, the Russians have been giving the Iranians targeting information. That was leaked a few days ago. And I remember reading it and just saying to a friend, well, of course they're giving the Iranians targeting information. They're allies. We're giving the Ukrainians targeting information. The Russians gave the North Vietnamese targeting information. We gave the Afghan Mujahideen targeting information and Stinger missiles. This is what enemies do to one another. So what's the best way to get that to stop? You just reach out directly to the Russians and say, please stop. Help us negotiate some kind of a ceasefire.
Oh, well, let's see if it's true.
But I'll add one other thing, Susie. We, here in the United States, we look like fools. We look like puppets of the Israelis, and we look like fools for being duped into yet another war of choice.
The 27 U.S. military facilities across the region have been struck, even in Çirlik Air Base in Turkey, which is one of the key hubs for U.S. air power for the whole Middle East, for decades, has been hit and rendered unusable, while several ports that the U.S. uses in the Gulf have also been damaged. Even the port that the U.S. was building in Oman, because they wanted to stop using the port in Dubai because of exposure and stuff, even that has been struck. So now the U.S. seems to be relying heavily on the ports in Europe and in India to ship equipment over. So what does I want your comment on this, please.
Yeah, see, this is yet another one of those examples of the United States just never thought would happen and so didn't prepare for. India is far from the war zone. It's far, and it's hard to get from India to the Persian Gulf. But this is exactly what we should have expected. The Iranians told us in advance that this would quickly escalate into a regional war. It did almost immediately. And then the Iranians told us that they would close the Strait of Hormuz. They're in the process of closing the Strait of Hormuz. This morning, they attacked 3 ships, 2 oil tankers and 1 cargo ship. Like, what did we think was going to happen? They told us what was going to happen.
Yeah.
And we just pretended not to hear.
So since you've touched upon that, the economic cost of the war to America is how much per day? I'm reading reports that it could be $800 million a day, and then I'm reading other reports that it could be up to $2 billion a day. So do you have a clearer idea?
Yeah, Axios reported 2 days ago, I think it was, that it was between $2 and $3 billion a day, and it reminded me of a story. Not a story. It reminded me of an incident where I was working at the CIA during the Kuwait-Iraq war, and it was right before we began the liberation of Kuwait. And I remember the president's morning briefer coming back to the office and saying that the president was shocked to speechless when they told him that we were spending $100 million a day in the Gulf.
100 million back then, yeah.
100 million. Well, just with inflation, it's going to be close to 2 billion.
Yes. And there's all these repercussions, right? We're seeing something extraordinary happening yesterday. You know, oil prices had surged towards the $115 per barrel mark, and then they suddenly drop right before the markets closed. You see President Trump calling CBS News to declare that the war was pretty much complete. The markets reacted immediately, and correcting themselves, but simultaneously the defense secretary, he told 60 Minutes simultaneously that the war might only be in the beginning. So before we go into the matter of two completely different perspectives on the same war by two people who are in daily contact, possibly hourly contact about the war. I mean, what does this say about the president effectively moving global markets through wartime messaging, just picking up the phone just to rectify the markets just for the day? And your take?
I think that's exactly what he did. But you could only do that once, twice, maybe possibly 3 times before people just don't believe anything you say anymore. And so long as you continue doing what you say you're not doing, or say that you're going to soon stop doing, the markets are going to stop reacting.
And what say does J.D. Vance have in all this, and Tulsi Gabbard? Because is it true that they're the only 2 people closest to the president who were firmly opposing this war?
Yeah, it was my understanding that it was Tulsi Gabbard, J.D. Vance, and General Kane, the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, which is quite common. Usually, the Joint Chiefs of Staff are the last ones that want to go to war.
Yeah.
And that's, it doesn't matter who's in the White House; they're always that way because they know how terrible war is. Tulsi Gabbard, I fear, has been marginalized and pushed off to the side. To tell you the truth, I think Marco Rubio is really running American foreign and defense policy. And I think that he's doing this not just because he's a neoconservative, that he really believes this stuff. Of course he believes it. But there's so much talk in Washington about the very young, relatively inexperienced J.D. Vance being Trump's choice to replace him. I don't think that's true. I think Marco Rubio is going to be the Republican nominee for president. And I think Rubio is doing a lot of this just so that he can stake his claim as the Republican frontrunner before J.D. Vance gets his footing.
Well, I mean, if J.D. Vance continues opposing this war behind closed doors in the Oval Office, then this is most certainly going to happen.
Yeah.
So
I think so too.
I mean, do you find the calls, these are calls or growing discussions online about invoking the 25th? I mean, people are really concerned. Americans are really concerned about invoking the 25th, which would allow for J.D. Vance to assume presidential authority, claiming the president is no longer able to perform his duties. Do you find these calls gaining traction? I mean, for it to happen, even if the vast majority of the population asks for it, it needs Congress to okay it. So I don't see it. I mean, do you find logic behind them?
No.
Rationale?
No, they would have to. No, they would have to determine that he's mentally ill and unable to carry out his duties as president. You can't invoke the 25th just because you don't like somebody's policies. And we have had two presidents with dementia. Joe Biden most recently, who clearly was demented. He was demented during the campaign.
Yes.
And then before him, Ronald Reagan. And no, seriously considered invoking the 25th Amendment. So no, see, it's winning on the part of Democrats. It's just not going to happen.
John, I want to go now to the area again, the region here. And Iran's foreign ministry has warned about what it says are Israeli false flag operations across the region, citing the incidents in Azerbaijan, in Cyprus. They also cited that. They're insisting that, yes, the British saying that the drone that hit the British bases in Cyprus did not leave Iran, but it left Lebanon. But the Iranians are saying that still it wasn't an Iranian drone. It was a false flag by the Israelis. Anyway, we know that Israel is occupying chunks of southern Lebanon. So you wouldn't expect, I mean, the truth is somewhere there. It depends on who you want to believe. But anyway, the Iranians are coming out saying that these are all false flag incidents. Azerbaijan, Cyprus, and Turkey, they've been falsely attributed to Iran. And we have seen false flags being uncovered when the Saudi and UAE authorities detained Mossad-linked operatives connected to the attacks on their infrastructure, specifically Aramco, which was initially attributed to Iran. They are doing their best to drag countries into this, make it into a regional war. And these are false flags that luckily so far were not acted upon. So this is quite scary. They're not going to give up. I mean, there's info now, about warning about in the U.S. there are all these sleeper cells, and maybe something could happen in the U.S. So how worried are you that maybe even in the U.S. something would happen that would be linked to Iran, but it's not really Iran that's behind it, but it's Israel that's behind it?
So I'm very fearful of Israeli false flags. The Israelis have been carrying out false flag operations since the founding of the State of Israel, and they're usually very good at it. There are some legendary stories that they taught us at the CIA about wonderful, creative, innovative false flag operations that had been carried out by the Israeli Mossad. As soon as we started seeing some of these attacks, on the Saudi oil field, on Azerbaijan, on Cyprus, my first thought was that they were Israeli false flags. What scares me the most is that the Israelis may try to attack the Al-Aqsa Mosque in Jerusalem and blame it on the Arabs, or blame it on the Iranians. I mean, Iranians, Shia Muslims don't necessarily believe that Al-Aqsa as a building is the third holiest site. They believe that the site is up in the sky, it's in heaven. But we know that the Israelis want to destroy Al-Aqsa. There are entire factions of the Israeli electorate that publicly advocate destroying Al-Aqsa and building the third temple. So this just has war written all over it. And I think that Israeli false flags are so prevalent, so dangerous, that we all need to be on the lookout for them.
John, do you think they would also maybe perform a false flag on U.S. territory, blame it on the Iranian sleeper cells, just to get U.S. boots on the ground if at all possible. How can anyone even fathom U.S. boots on the ground in that country, in that vast country, 92 million population? Do you think that is a possibility that they are even entertaining? Are you fearful of that?
God, I hate to say it. Yes, I am fearful. And yes, I think they are entertaining. And I only say that because after promise after promise that there would be no American boots on the ground, both President Trump and Secretary of Defense Hegseth have said that we are at least planning for that as a contingency measure. I think that would be a death sentence for thousands of Americans. You know, I was on Fox News the other night because there was a leak, and I'm sure that it was an authorized leak, that the United States is in talks with the Iranian Kurds to use the Kurds as the frontline boots on the ground. And they asked me, you know, if this was possible. I said, sure, it's possible. The United States has long had very warm and friendly relations with Iraq's Kurds and with Syria's Kurds, not necessarily with Iran's Kurds because there's no contact really, excuse me, and certainly no relationship at all with Turkey's Kurds. But the Iranian Kurds hate the central government. It's just that there's nothing they can do about it. If they were to begin moving toward Tehran, they would be obliterated by the Iranian military. You know, I suppose if the goal is to draw out Kurds onto the open battlefield so that the Iranian Air Force can bomb them, that's one thing. But Iran's Kurds are not going to liberate the country and overthrow this government for the American and the Israeli governments.
Yeah, I mean, there's been talk about that and about America wanting to arm them and fund them, but isn't that a bit too late? And isn't that a bit hard to do logistically? I mean, of course, it can be done through Turkey, but I don't know if Turkey wouldn't allow it. Seriously, I don't know if you want to explain to the people
no
why.
Way. Turkey has to live in that neighborhood. They don't want to provoke the Iranians unnecessarily. That doesn't make any sense for Turkish policy. The Turks would get nothing out of that.
And they don't want the Kurds to end up setting up their own, which is their
exactly
their lifelong dream also, to have their own state, the state of Kurdistan. They've been always opposing it. And that's the reason why they also subjugated the Kurds in Syria once Trump withdrew his support of them in 2020, his financial and armed support of them, when they did all the work for Trump. They were fighting ISIS on his behalf. Once they got that done, of course, ISIS reemerged now with Jolani, but anyway, so he withdrew his support of them.
Yeah.
Turkey infiltrated the northern part of Syria where the Kurds are and has occupied it since, because he doesn't want a strong Kurdish population to set up a Kurdish state. So it's very hard. Israel wants to open that second front for Iran so that they are busy and not focused on the one front. But it's very hard for America and Israel to do that with the Iranians with the Kurds in Iran, right?
It's very hard. It's very hard because you're right. Listen, I'm a longtime supporter of the Kurds, and I believe that the Kurds deserve an independent Kurdistan. But it's just not going to happen. It's not going to happen because no regional power, no great power is going to allow it to happen. There was very briefly an independent Kurdistan in northern Iraq from 1946 to 1949. That was it. The Iraqi Kurds now have autonomy, which is great because half of the country's oil reserves are in Kurdish territory, so they make some money. But nobody's going to get an independent Kurdistan. And the Iranian Kurds have never even approached a point where they may declare independence. So no, see, but this is another example of Donald Trump, Marco Rubio, Pete Hegseth underestimating the Iranian government and the Iranian people, in that they believe that Kurds are Kurds are Kurds. And so if we're friendly with the if we're friendly with the Iraqi Kurds or the Syrian Kurds, then the Iranian Kurds are going to love us and they're going to do what we say. And, oh, look, our bombing didn't overthrow the Iranian government, but that's okay because the Kurds will do it for us. And it's like, no, the Kurds won't do it for you.
Yeah.
It's too late.
I think it's been many years when correct Secret Service briefings were held with the U.S. president or any U.S. president over the last few years. I mean, at least with the case with Trump, he's been surrounded by people who are promoting obviously someone else's agenda. Even Tucker mentioned it the other day. He said that on a personal level, he visited Trump. He paid a visit to Trump in Washington. It was a Monday or Tuesday right before the war was about to start, because he could tell the war was about to start. He wanted to talk him out of it. And then even when the war started, Tucker said he tried contacting Trump and they just wouldn't give him Trump on the phone. They told him, look, forget about it. He's just locked up in that room, and they're showing him all these polls that are giving him all these numbers that there's a 9 to 10 chance that he's going to win the war. So,
you know what? Let me comment on that, if I may, because
yes,
I have
please.
a little bit of inside information I can pass on. So I have a friend who works in the Republican National Committee, and he told me more than a month ago that the internal secret Republican National Committee polls show what he called a bloodbath against the Republicans. That was before the war. Donald Trump,
talking about the midterms,
threw the dice.
He was mentioned.
The midterms.
It's the midterms. Okay.
Yes, the midterms. Donald Trump rolled the dice, thinking, if I can collapse this Iranian government, I'm going to be a hero, and the polls are going to jump up for the Republicans, and it's going to be, it's going to be a historic advantage and a historic turnaround for the Republican Party. Well, exactly the opposite has happened. Now, the polls are so dire because we're bogged down in a war that we can't possibly win. Now, instead of losing 15 seats and flipping control to the Democrats, control of the House of Representatives, they're looking at 40 to 50 seats.
Yeah,
and now for the first time, they're looking at losing the Senate as well. So this was a disaster and a terrible, terrible decision.
So Americans need to understand that opposing this war, am I right to say this, is not about left versus right. If you're a Republican, you're opposing this war, doesn't make you a Democrat, doesn't make you a liberal. It's about interventionists versus non-interventionists, right? It's about America first,
that's right,
not Israel first.
Yes, that's exactly right. We're having this very odd realignment politically in the United States right now, Susie, where members of the progressive left and members of the Make America Great Again, the MAGA right, are coming together on this issue because neither one of them want war. Yeah. Who would have thought? This is unprecedented in American history. It's like the communists and the fascists joining forces to oppose war. I mean, I'm exaggerating a little bit, of course, because progressives aren't communists and MAGAs aren't fascists. Most of them aren't. So it's astounding to me that the Republican and Democratic Party leaderships have not realized that they're losing their own people on this issue. The American people don't want war. We had decades of uninterrupted wars that we ended up losing in the end. We're bankrupt as a country. Our roads are shit. Our airports look like they belong in the third world. We have bridges that are falling into the rivers below them. And I want to know why the Chinese have trains that go 500 kilometers an hour. And I have to go on a train. I could walk faster than some of the trains that we have in the United States.
Man,
why do the Chinese get all these things? Because the Chinese don't waste their money on
war. They don't on war. And the money you spend on all these wars, you could have had free healthcare for everyone, and the best education system, and no homeless people, no vets being homeless, all these veterans being homeless. That's shameful. Shameful.
It is, and we have veterans literally every single day committing suicide. Many of them committing suicide in the parking lots of the Veterans Administration hospitals that refuse to treat them for post-traumatic stress disorder.
Poor people. Very sad.
It's something like as many as 6 a day kill themselves in the Veterans Administration hospital parking lots.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, the lobbyists don't care about that. Neither does AIPAC. John,
No.
I wanted to
No, that's
I
right.
wanted to touch also on Lebanon. You know, that is my fatherland. So there's Lebanon is also very worrisome, the situation there. Yes, there is the supposed ceasefire signed back in the end of 2024. Israel never kept up to its terms of the ceasefire. They never stopped bombing South Lebanon. Since then, until February 28th, they had killed through their attacks and their bombings hundreds of Lebanese civilians. They never stopped also using, what do you say, white phosphorus, which Amnesty International deems
Yes.
it's not a legal means of war. It causes long-term injuries, severe burns, and destruction of farmland. We know why they're doing that. Since people are not deserting South Lebanon, they want to destroy their livelihoods so that they do end up deserting South Lebanon. And the latest is that Israel has issued, what do you say, a directive that 53 villages and towns of South Lebanon needed to be evacuated. And the sad truth of the matter is, as we speak, 300,000 Lebanese from South Lebanon have acted up on those orders, descending upon Beirut and other parts of Lebanon, living in tents or in their cars or with family. So, and they've killed since March 1st hundreds of civilians, 85 of them being children. How realistic is the Greater Israel Project today as we speak, as far as Lebanon is concerned?
Yeah, I think that the Israelis have guaranteed that Lebanon will be a failed state. I don't think any Israeli government is going to allow Lebanon to flourish as a nation. I think we will continue to see Israeli attacks, Israeli forced displacement of civilians. I read a statistic yesterday that by the end of the week, as many as 700,000 Lebanese will be internally displaced. This is a humanitarian disaster. And the world, most of the world isn't focused on it because they're all watching what's unfolding in Iran. Well, Lebanon already doesn't have enough food, enough medical care, enough clean water. It's only going to get worse. So take that and couple it with these incredibly provocative statements made by the fascist evangelical American ambassador to Israel, Mike Huckabee, to Tucker Carlson 2 weeks ago, that he has no problem with Greater Israel and said, quote, they should just take it. Yeah. And what he meant by it was all Arab land from the Euphrates River to the Nile. Just take it. He doesn't care. So if that's the attitude of the representative, of the president of the United States, then I think we should all be living in fear.
I wanted to ask you, before we close this, how do you see this ending? I mean, not the war as such, but all this thing we're living under, Greater Israel and all this threat of Greater Israel, and it's becoming more and more realistic. And up until a few years ago, it was just like, oh, you're a conspiracy theorist for even mentioning it. But it's all out in the open. That's now. Right. They're making public statements about it. Yeah. Netanyahu has been caught on camera publicly stating that it's his lifelong ambition. When the war started, he was happy to speak on camera and saying this has been 40 years in the making for me, a dream for me, the war with Iran, because Iran is their last, stopping them from realizing the Greater Israel Project. Well, Iran and Turkey, which is why Naftali Bennett, the former Israeli prime minister, is also now saying after Iran, it's Turkey. Turkey's next. So how do you see all this ending? I mean, do you see them realizing these goals? Because they weren't so close to realizing them a few years ago, but now it's all, unraveling.
I don't see them succeeding. There are too many Arabs There are too many Muslims. There are too many people who oppose this naked Israeli aggression. I don't even care. Well, I shouldn't say I don't care because I care very much. But I don't think it matters even if the United States were to support such a crazy position. And the United States wouldn't support such a crazy position. Mike Huckabee is a fluke in the system.
But they have
and he'll
been
be gone
supporting
soon
it,
anyway.
John. They have. I mean, they're
Not a greater Israel.
but what are all these wars that the U.S. has been doing over the last 25 years? The 7 nations that Bibi kept saying that they need to get out of the way to topple their regimes. They've reached the 7th nation. So who has done those wars on their behalf? It's
Susie,
America who's done these wars on their behalf.
Look at them independently, though. Libya was no threat to Israel. Never was, never would be. Libya was a thorn in the side of the United States. The U.S. didn't overthrow and kill Gaddafi for Israel. We did it for ourselves. Same in Somalia. Somalia is no threat to Israel at all. Never was. They were a threat to the United States or at least to American commerce. Excuse me. Afghanistan, I mean, that was, for a while, that was a righteous war. It was a war to destroy al-Qaeda. It morphed into something that was wrong. It morphed into this never-ending war against the Taliban, who had never attacked the United States. But in the beginning, that was a righteous war. We had to destroy al-Qaeda. It's not that the Israelis wanted us to. It certainly was in Israel's interest, but that was the United States all the way. You know, listen, I am not a fan of Israel. I am even less of a fan of Israeli leadership. But we can't blame all of our problems on Israel. We can blame the United States for its mistakes too.
Well, on Libya, I beg to differ because it was Gaddafi and him making the announcement that he's going to unhook the petrol.
That's what I'm saying. That's what I'm saying. That was a threat to the American economy. We didn't need the Israelis to egg us on to overthrow Gaddafi.
Well, I mean, the Israelis were also purporting that he was funding the so-called Arab terrorists and stuff. So, Bibi has been on record naming the 7 nations. They've had a strong grip on your politicians for sure for the last 30 years, John.
Yeah. Of course, no, I'm not denying that American and Israeli interests intersect. I'm just saying that these 7 countries on the list, while some of them absolutely are enemies of Israel, the U.S. had in their own national interests reasons to overthrow them.
Understood. Okay. Now, my last question, a very concerning one, the Samson option. I mean, I'm sure everyone thinks it's not going to happen. It's very far-fetched, but with them in power now, Bibi and everyone, I mean, you can't tell. So, I mean, how plausible do you think they would use it? If Israel believed that it was close to losing this very important war for itself or losing support from America on this war, would they resort to that? The new use of nuclear weapons as a last resort?
If the Israelis believed that the state of Israel was untenable because of, Arab advances, for example, that there were Arab or Iranian threats that could lead eventually even to the end of the state of Israel, yes, I think they would use the Samson option. I gave an interview yesterday in which I said that even a year ago, I would have said that was ridiculous. It was a doom ideology. And now I have to say that, I believe the Israelis would carry this out. If they really believed they were in threat of collapse, yes, they would take everybody out with them. And analysts say, even though the Israelis have never acknowledged the existence of a nuclear program or nuclear arsenal, analysts tell us that they have between 80 and 200 warheads. That's enough to kill everybody. Everybody.
Yeah. Very scary. One last question: your thoughts on the rapid accumulation of all this military buildup in Cyprus? You have Spain. You know of them. Spain has deployed a frigate, and Italy has deployed another air defense frigate. France has deployed the aircraft carrier, what is it, Charles de Gaulle, with the frigate Languedoc and advanced anti-missile, anti-drone systems to Cyprus. Greece has deployed 2 frigates, Kimon and Psara. Kimon is considered amongst the most technologically advanced frigates currently in operational service worldwide, 4 F-16 fighter jets, and then a Hellenic Air Force C-130 transport aircraft. The United Kingdom is sending over HMS Dragon. This is like, what is it today? 9 days after the attack, the drone attack on their bases. They're still going to send the HMS Dragon. They have serious problem with their military. I mean, the finances with their military is down the hole. The Netherlands also has sent over a frigate. And over a matter of just 6 days, this small island in the corner of the Mediterranean Sea has seen the most high-level visits we've ever seen in a matter of, I don't know, we haven't seen it maybe ever even in the span of a year. We've had the Greek defense minister visit Cyprus March 3rd with the top brass of the Greek army to coordinate defense planning with the Cypriot counterparts. March 5th, the UK defense minister visits Cyprus to meet with his Cypriot counterpart. March 6th, Friday, the president of the Republic of Cyprus met with MI6 chief Blaise Metruel at the presidential palace. And on Monday, March 9th, Emmanuel Macron and Greek Prime Minister Kyriakos Mitsotakis visited Cyprus for consultations. Just your word on what's happening and why.
As bad a policy as this is, the NATO militaries, and even more broadly, the European Union militaries, feel compelled to at least have the appearance of being supportive of Israel and the United States. And so, behind closed doors, they probably sighed deeply and said, well, let's send a frigate or 2 frigates or a battleship or a hospital ship and at least make it look like we're trying to do our part. I think that's what it comes down to. Which is funny to me because the Spanish prime minister made some of the strongest anti-war statements out there. And the next thing you know, they're sending a frigate.
The next day he's sending
So I think they're doing it just... Exactly. You said something a minute ago that I think deserves a little bit of exploration. There was this statement recently about Turkey being the next big enemy of Israel, that Israel is going to have to confront. But Turkey's a NATO country. So what happens if Israel attacks Turkey? The United States has to come in on the side of Turkey.
They have to invoke Article 5 of NATO. Will they?
They have to invoke Article 5 of NATO. They're obligated by treaty to come in on the side of Turkey and fight against Israel.
Okay.
Now, will they is an entirely different question.
Yeah, because let's not forget.
If they didn't, of course. And if they didn't, and I think that they wouldn't, that would be the end of NATO.
Yeah. John, I know I said that was the last question, but I'm getting another question in by my producer, and he's right. I need to ask you, because it's like if someone would know, John would know, being he was in the Secret Service, because here in Cyprus, we've always wanted to know, to the best of your ability, are there nuclear weapons being stored in the British bases in Cyprus?
That's a great question. I don't know, but I would guess.
Bible, you don't know?
Pardon me?
Bible, you don't know?
Hear you. Bible, I don't know. No, I honestly, as God is my witness, I don't know. I don't even know where the American nuclear weapons are based. Those are highly guarded secrets in the ministries of defense. I would guess probably yes. but I don't know.
Okay. John, as always, my friend, thank you for your honesty
Good to see you.
and for helping us understand
You
what's
bet.
really happening behind the headlines. Thank you.
It's an ugly situation out there. Thanks for having me.
We'll hope to speak to you again soon, my friend.
I look forward to it. Bye-bye.
Thank you for watching. A small request on my part. The channel is so close to 10,000 subscribers. I need your help to get us there. It just takes 2 seconds. Just hit subscribe and tap the bell. That's the best way to support Unfiltered with Sam. This is the only English language woman-led geopolitical interview platform broadcasting from the Eastern Mediterranean. So subscribe, share, and help this voice reach further. From here in Cyprus, this is Unfiltered with Sam. Until next time.